Draft day.
Who are the Denver Nuggets targeting with trades and or picks on draft night? What does Jerami Grant heading to Portland mean for the Nuggets? Plus, Adam is going to try and teach me about a guy named Micic. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for making this your first listen each and every day. We're free and we're available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can catch a live version of the show. Join the chat with guys and girls and people like Zamora King. I finally found Zamora's Twitter last night and was able to follow him back. Very excited to follow Zamora. Very excited for that. We got full house in the chat going as we record this on Thursday morning, the day of the 2022 NBA draft. We got lots to get to today. We're going to talk about Dejounte Murray and the available in trade talks. At least it's been discussed with the Atlanta Hawks. Should the Nuggets maybe put in an offer for Dejounte Murray? I'll let you know what I've heard as far as trade talks with the Nuggets and their trade targets and what could likely happen. We'll get into potential targets. We're going to talk about Jerami Grant to Portland, a deal that happened yesterday. Old friend Jerami Grant, whose foray into Detroit did not end maybe the way that he thought, and he's now headed to the Portland Trailblazers. We'll talk about what that means for Denver. And in the last segment, a lot of talks about the Nuggets picking up an international prospect. And Adam is going to teach me all about him. We're going to do that.
Another itch.
On another itch. Itches be crazy, baby. All that and more on today's edition of Locked On
You're
Nuggets.
never going to guess who's advocating in the chat for Micic.
You're Miroslav. Whoa. Oh, my gosh. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, joined by my colleague and friend, Adam Mares. You can find him on Twitter at Adam_Mares. Make sure to check out all of the draft night content. We have a Locked On NBA draft show that I'm going on like 15 minutes after the pick, and Adam's got stuff at DNVR, and there's all sorts of crazy stuff going on. You want coverage. You are in a great spot for coverage of the Denver Nuggets, which is good because anything could happen tonight. I'll tell you that. Like, there's not anything. The Nuggets are not trading for Paolo Banchero. How about that? I'll say that like right now. The Nuggets are not trading for Paolo Banchero, but there's a lot of things. What they did.
Why do you think the markets are moving?
There's a lot of things in play, I think. Let's start here. Jake Fisher of Bleacher Report reported this morning that the San Antonio Spurs have engaged the Atlanta Hawks on trade talks with involving Dejounte Murray. It requires a quote Drew Holiday type deal. For those of you who don't remember, the Milwaukee Bucks traded 5 first-round picks to get Drew Holiday, and everyone was like, "Ooh, that seems steep." And then they won the title, and everyone was like, "Ooh, that might have been worth it." I will tell you, one, this is coming from Atlanta's side because the Spurs do not leak things. So just heads up, this is from Atlanta's side or from Dejounte's side, conceivably. There's been some conversation about the Spurs maybe pivoting and looking more towards the future and maybe like deconstructing this roster. My opinion, Adam, is that while I think Dejounte Murray would be, a good addition for the Denver Nuggets, I don't think it works for the money. I don't think the Nuggets can put together. I literally do not think they have enough assets.
Well, can we do that part of this first so we can know the price before we talk about him? Like, in your opinion, what is it? Is there a way to do it, first of all, with keeping the big four intact, meaning MPJ, Gordon, Murray, Jokic? Like, is there everything else package enough to get Dejounte Murray?
Maybe in a 3-way with Atlanta.
Or
no, I'm sorry. What I was thinking there was including one of the big four.
Like, there's not a way to get him that includes Bones, Zeke, and picks as the centerpiece, and then you make the salaries match with the Monte or something?
No, given how many picks the Nuggets have already traded, no.
Right. I mean, in theory, on draft night, they could trade both of their first rounders here. I don't know that San Antonio is looking for 2 first rounders in one draft with on top of what they already have.
In a weak draft on top of it.
Yeah, that part of it, I think, gets overstated when you talk about 21-30. Like, strong weak draft usually means top 3 and top 14. Like we're talking about, are the top 3 guys strong and are the lottery picks strong? But when you get to 21-30, what are we? At a certain point, everything levels out.
Oh,
nonetheless, you're still talking about a bunch of picks in one draft for the Spurs. I don't know if they want that.
This is a good point by Will Strada, who's Murray times 2. Yeah, I don't think I can deal with Murray to Murray, back to Murray, Murray to Murray for the lob, Murray with a jam. I don't think I could do it. I don't know if I can do that. That's worse than drafting Wendell Moore and me having to deal with my name being mentioned all the time.
If you're San Antonio, I'm just curious about this because I look at it and I go, Monte Morris is the salary piece of this, or one of the big salary pieces of this. He seems to me like a Spur. So again, not a super value. This is not a Murray for Monte trade. I'm just saying like that's a Spur type player, and he helps the contracts. Zeke Naji to me feels like a Spur player as well. So that's a first round pick, more or less a first round pick. And Bones Highland, I think everybody in the league wants. So that's a first round pick. So you're at Monte Morris and 2 picks. If you included a pick in this draft, you're at Monte and 3 picks. Still below the threshold.
I think the bigger thing here is you have to think not can the Nuggets put together a compelling offer, but can the Nuggets put together an offer that the Spurs specifically are going to be like, that's the best we can do.
Right.
Now, I'll have to say this. I think the conversations about what these teams can expect are really dumb, and I think we'll talk about that in the second segment. Jerami Grant went for a 2025 Milwaukee first rounder.
This is my thing. I feel like every trade is either way more expensive, a la Jrue Holiday, than everybody was talking about, or way cheaper than what everybody's talking about. Trades are almost never what people are talking about.
In my experience, nobody is like breaking the bank for Dejounte Murray.
He's not as good as Jrue Holiday.
Yeah, he's really good. Like I loved watching Dejounte last year. I actually really liked it. I found myself watching the Spurs a lot. Last year, I actually really enjoyed them, and their commentary crew chilled out, which was nice too. But I enjoyed the way that they played, and Dejounte showed a ton in terms of his development and making reads off a pick and roll. The shot is starting to recover after his injury. Like there's all these reasons why I think Dejounte Murray is a really good player.
Right.
I can't justify a Jrue Holiday type offer, especially like I don't know what Dejounte Murray is the missing guy, let alone the Nuggets. Like if you're the Nuggets, do you really look at it and go?
I think he undoubtedly makes the Nuggets better. The question, does he make them better enough to basically deplete your arsenal of trade assets? And that's what it takes. So I'm with you. Like I'm so intrigued by Dejounte Murray. So we talk about just the fit stuff. Like he's a very good on-ball defender, can get around screens. He's got length. And then the thing is, like his shooting is the thing you would worry about. I don't worry about it with Denver just because I think Denver's going to have spacing. And Denver hasn't had it, other than Bones, that super quick first step guy. And I think Dejounte Murray would feast with an open paint that he would get in Denver. I just think he would be the best version offensively of himself while maintaining what he's been defensively. So I think he would be a really good fit. But when you get into a playoff series, the question becomes like, does he make that level of impact? Because the Nuggets offense is going to inevitably whittle down more to the Murray-Jokic dynamic, Jamal Murray dynamic. So his offense maybe gets diminished. And is his defense going to be that Andrew Wiggins, Gary Payton-esque level where it's like, oh, wow, who would have seen Dejounte Murray shut down a superstar, an MVP candidate? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah.
But probably not.
I mean, the question, I think here's a good question. Is Dejounte Murray closer to Jrue Holiday or Derek White? Right?
I mean, I think he's closer to Jrue Holiday.
Like Derek White was
still a scale. It's still a scale, though. It's not.
Yeah,
it's not
here's my thing. Think about where Derek White was after that 2019 playoff series, where like White went thermonuclear with Jamal guarding him.
If you remember, he only went that for 2 games.
Yeah, and because he took Jamal off of it.
Right. Right.
Yeah, like but my point here is more that's the scale. Is like the Celtics were like, we got an impact guy in Derek White. And then Derek White was basically unplayable at the end of the finals. But like Derek White helped them make the finals.
Yeah.
Right? Like he was pivotal in the Bucks series. He was crucial in the Heat series.
Oh, no question about it. No question about it.
He was great in game 1 versus the Warriors. And then the Warriors were like, yeah, you can keep shooting. We don't care.
He is probably like somewhere right close to the middle of those two guys, in my opinion. I think he would help Denver win a playoff series. I don't know if he'd help him win a title.
That's a good way to put it. Either way, I don't think it's realistic. I also am very skeptical that the Spurs will actually wind up committing to that kind of a trade. I kind of here's what I wonder. If you want me to like, do you want the not tinfoil hat, just like me trying to read tea leaves or underground pipelines?
Sure. Why not?
The Hawks are trying to move John Collins, and they're trying to get the best offer available for him. And Portland basically said the 7 is too much for John Collins. We want more in return.
This actually makes a lot of sense that this is a leverage play, like a setting the value of John Collins play than anything. But yeah,
Boston wants John Collins. I'll tell you that right now. They've been involved in those talks. There's a couple of other teams that have called about John Collins, but they're still not, I don't think, generating the kind of interest that they want going into draft night, where there is an imperative to trade both he and old friend Danilo Gallinari. I expect both those players to be on different teams by the end of the night. There's longstanding relationships between the Atlanta Hawks and the San Antonio Spurs. Like Travis Schlenk has a good relationship with the front office. So it makes a lot of sense for this to get out that the Hawks, that Dejounte Murray's were going to require Drew Holiday type of deal, but like that raises the value on John Collins, because it's like, well, John Collins could be involved in a Dejounte Murray trade, that involves itself in such a way. Like that to me is my read on it. Is this is a leverage play for John Collins.
I feel like most trades that come out 24 hours before the draft have some like secondary motivation. Not to say that those things haven't been discussed in some capacity, but that it's usually like, why would it come out now unless it's hey, everybody, do you see what's happening over here? Two other things on this. If you look at other options here, obviously you're not going to trade Jokic. It doesn't make sense to trade Jamal Murray for Murray. So those are out. I don't think it makes sense to trade Gordon for Murray either. Like if you were talking about including somebody in a deal, I just don't. You need the 2 defenders. You need the 2 and the 4. So taking one away to replace the other just doesn't make sense to me. And then Michael Porter, if we listed all of the Nuggets players in most Spurs-like to least Spurs-like, Michael Porter would be least Spurs-like on top of obviously the contract and injury. So I don't think it makes sense to move any of the top 4 guys, or possible to move any of the top 4 guys. So those are out. And then the last thing Alec Gwynn pointed out here, which I think is kind of funny. I don't fully buy into this, although I did bring it up when the Tim Conley thing was happening. Calvin, without an assurance of the future, has less motivation than most GMs to worry about the future. Like if it's like, hey, I need to make a splash now, and if I do that and I get an A draft grade and an A free agency grade, and everybody's talking about how great the Nuggets are, no matter how it works out and how it sets us up for the future, I probably get an extension. Again, I don't think Calvin is thinking totally that way, but it is an interesting dynamic of all of this, is that Calvin can earn an extension before Summer League begins just by like winning the trade, winning the next week.
Right.
Not necessarily making good moves, but winning the narrative of the next week.
Let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk about Jerami Grant to Portland, as well as what I've heard about various trade options for the Denver Nuggets going into draft night. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I want to tell you about Arcade 1-Up. Boom! Shakalaka. We've got big news. The one, the only NBA Jam is back. Arcade 1-Up, the leader in at-home retro arcade games, so many great games they've got over there, is not only bringing the best game ever back, but they've made it bigger than ever with, wait for it, a Shaq edition machine. Loved the Shaq Penny teams on NBA Jam. Used to absolutely dominate. Them and the Spurs were my go-to guys. People are obsessed with NBA Jam, and I'm thrilled to tell our listeners that you can once again play hoops with NBA legends in this arcade classic. Jump clear across the court and set the ball on fire in one of the first sports games ever to feature real and digitized NBA licensed teams. No fouls, no free throws, and no quarters required. Compete with friends and family through the all-new Wi-Fi leaderboards, making you more connected than ever. Pre-order now from arcade1up.com. That's arcade1up.com for an estimated early September ship date. Arcade 1-Up is the place for fun. They've got even more classics like Golden Tee. I dominate at Golden Tee. Just be advised, if you ever catch me on Golden Tee, you better run. Mortal Kombat, which I can never figure out the combos on Mortal Kombat ever. Ever. Like Street Fighter I can do. I cannot do the combos on Mortal Kombat. I just got wrecked. It was so frustrating. And many others starting at just $399. Check this out. They're giving away an NBA Jam Shaq edition to a Locked On listener. Enter for a chance to win a game console for your man cave at Arcade oneup.com/lockedon. That's arcade, the number 1 up.com/lockedon. You got till July 8th to enter to win NBA Jam Shaq Edition console. Don't miss out. Enter today. Who are you going to play with? We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for making us part of your day and your first listen each and every day. I have to tell you about NBA Draft Night because it's going to be so exciting on the Locked On Network. One live NBA draft show is not enough for Locked On Nuggets. Every show is going live on Draft Night. You can join me 15 minutes after I pick over at Locked On Nuggets. I'm going to be having like a quick reaction to the pick for the immediate reaction from your local experts. Subscribe now to Locked On Nuggets so you know when we go live. Back here with Adam Mares. All right, Adam. Yesterday, the Portland Trailblazers pulled off the deal they've been working for, and they did not. The trajectory of this rumor was really funny because in the beginning it was like the Blazers could trade the number 7 pick for Jerami Grant, and then there kind of started to be noise that like they think they could do better than Jerami Grant. Atlanta was interested in Jerami Grant. Again, Atlanta really wants to make trades. Just really wants to. Chicago was in on those conversations. Phoenix has kicked the tires on Jerami Grant. And ultimately on Wednesday, Jerami Grant goes to Portland for a protected, mind you, a top 4 protected 2025 Milwaukee Bucks pick.
Yeah.
Look, there's a way this is the 5th overall pick. Like if Giannis gets hurt and misses the entire 2024-25 season.
Right.
Possible.
It's probably going to be the 25th pick.
It's probably going to be a 25th pick or worse.
Yeah.
This is one of the most dominant regular season teams over the last 4 years with Giannis. So they got almost nothing for Jerami Grant. Notably, Jerami Grant had, he talked to James Edwards over the Athletic and said it was important for him to play for a black coach. That was important to him. Obviously, playing for Chauncey Billups in Portland. Obviously, wants a big role in Detroit. Was going to move more towards Cade Cunningham and whatever they wind up doing with the 5th overall pick tonight. So, and honestly, just like Jerami wasn't a good fit there. He just was never really. He wasn't the guy that he wanted. Because
Jerami Grant is a fit as a role player, like he was in Denver. Like that's his best fit. So,
my understanding is that he's not like, you know what, I am a role player. That is not what I hear. Which is why I think this is really funny in that they're still, so the Blazers are still trying to move for OG Anunoby. I guess first off, I want to say, like, what are your thoughts on the Jerami Grant deal? And then I'll fill you in on what I know about the rest of Portland's moves.
Well, here's what I would say is I look at it and I go, Portland last year was a punted year, clearly trying to set up for this year. And if they're trying to get an OG and Jerami Grant defensive duo, like wing duo around Damian Lillard, Lillard is a really good offensive engine. He can make a lot of things happen. If you give him floor spacing, like we saw when Denver beat them, it wasn't because their offense struggled at all. Their offense was ridiculous. They scorched Denver, but they just couldn't stop anyone. Do OG and Jerami Grant move the needle there? I think so. Makes them better. Like if they get OG on top of Jerami Grant and Yusuf Nurkic still there, like I think their defense is going to be pretty solid. Not great, but it's going to be pretty solid, and that's an interesting team. I don't think it's a championship team, but it's a team that presents unique prop challenges in a playoff series. If they swap Nurkic for Ayton, all of a sudden, then that is actually now the team's starting to come together in a way that I'm like, again, I don't think it's a championship team, but it starts to become a team that you go, man, that's a tough out in the playoffs. So that's how I look at them. I looked at them and thought, they're going to do something. It's probably not going to be enough to make them a title contender, but does it make them just another hard team in the West so that you probably have to have 3 tough series to get to the finals? Yeah, it's just another team that's probably getting better.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of like balance the adjustment here because I don't want to underreact or overreact. Jerami Grant's a really good player. They're likely to add other good players. Portland's probably going to be not only out of the play-in tournament, which would be a step up for them, but they're probably going to be a solid playoff team next year with and they'll be talking about it.
They might still be a play-in team just because again the play-in is like the 7th seed. If you just go through the West, there's a lot of teams that if they're healthy, though, are they better than Dallas, for example?
I don't know.
But yeah, you got like Golden State, you've got Denver, you've got the Clippers. We'll see what the Lakers do. Like you could be a really good team in the play-in next year. And that's kind of my point.
True.
We're all waiting for one of these teams that thinks they're good to have a disaster, over the next week. And it's like, oh, I thought New Orleans was going to make a move, but turns out they're just going to be bad again. Or something of that nature.
I guess the reason I'm trying to be kind of cautiously optimistic for Portland is that I don't really think Dallas is that good, and they still wound up with the 4 seed. So it's like that's like an optimum outcome for Portland, is that they made the Western Conference Finals because the Suns get COVID.
They might be a Dallas-like team where none of us think they're that good, but they just keep winning, and it's like, wow, they're the 3 seed. But
yeah, exactly.
They're that good.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Like Dallas was really good last year, so it's entirely possible. The other things that they're it's no secret that's been known forever. They want to trade the number 7 for OG Anunoby. If they don't get OG Anunoby, I think they're keeping the pick. There's talk this morning of Cam Johnson. I heard that from 2 different people, that Cam Johnson is on the table for Portland to trade. I don't know if 7 for Cam Johnson, that feels steep. But in terms of like,
I like Cam Johnson. He came on last year. Like he was starting to really,
me too.
Get over the hump. So
so I think that's really good. I like Cam Johnson for them more than OG Anunoby. And the reason I say that is because Jerami wants the ball and thinks he's a star. I tweeted this yesterday. Jerami wants the ball and thinks he's a star. I will just tell you, like, Clutch Sports in typical fashion is not being subtle about OG Anunoby is like not getting the opportunity he deserves to be the type of player that he thinks he is.
So crazy, man.
And so OG wants like a bigger role. I don't understand why everybody's like, we want a bigger role. I want to go to Portland next to Damian Lillard. Like, Dame needs help, but Dame's still going to have one of the highest usage rates. He's Damian Lillard. And then ultimately, the other thing I'll say is the expectation is that they're going to keep Jusuf Nurkic. As long as Damian Lillard is your point guard and Jusuf Nurkic is your center, I do not think you can build a good enough defense. I will continue to say this. I think if you replace Jusuf Nurkic with a switchable 5, you could do it. I think if you replace Damian Lillard with a bigger guard that can get over screens, you can do it. I do not believe that no matter who you put around them, no matter how good those defenders are, you can do this. So, hey,
I will say that it's an important thing to note. In that Portland series, Nurk was a positive. Like every game followed the exact same. Every game Denver won followed the same script. Jokic fouled Nurkic out in 25 minutes. Yep. They lost the 25 minutes, and then they dominated the other minute. So as much as I'm with you about their defense was bad even with Nurkic, it was still good enough for their nuclear level offense that they had with Damian on fire in that level. It's just that their defense completely cratered once Nurkic went out. So I'm with you. It's not a good defense, but it's still like, I don't think Portland's this team that you can just say like, oh, Denver will never struggle with him. I think Denver beats him. They could put these wings around him that make the margins a little closer.
Yeah, I mean, I am leveraging this against Jamal being out as part of that. So, like,
it's a great point.
Like, if Jamal is coming off of the pick and rising and firing, and then like literally the Nuggets, all they had to do was be like, "Hey, Monte Morris, why don't you run some pick and rolls?" Okay, and then the Portland defense was like, "Mwah, mwah." So.
Ayton, by the way, gives Jokic a hard time, like way harder than Nurkic, and so he's an interesting fit there. Just because I would look at that and be a little bit more concerned.
Yeah, boy, the Ayton stuff is all over the place. Okay, so I want to pivot before we take a break and let you know. I wouldn't say that I can't tell you 100%, and you can tell me if you've heard different. I can't tell you that KCP is their number 1 trade target. I would say that he is definitely on that board of if there's a tier of trade targets for Denver in terms of realistic options that are not like, Dejounte Murray. I think KCP is very high on that list. Are we in agreement there?
Yep, no question about it to me.
Okay, so Washington, I got this from 2 different people. Washington is called the Pelicans, and it's talking about a pick swap with 8, and Washington has made a play for 4. And both of those deals involved Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. So the Wizards are trying to move KCP, which is good for the Nuggets, but it sounds like they want draft equity, which is bad for the Nuggets. Bradley Beal opted out of his last year of his contract, so he's going to be a free agent. There's still expectation that he basically is going to opt out and then sign the Supermax and then probably ask for a trade in a year because this is the NBA. So I don't necessarily know that they're pivoting towards a rebuild. But I do think that KCP is likely to get moved sometime between now and July 15th. It could be tonight. It could be first day of free agency, whatever. I think it's likely that KCP gets moved. And I think that there's probably some struggle for Denver trying to match up with what Washington wants for KCP. But also, like we talked about with Jerami Grant, maybe those deals never come together and they're like, all right, let's just go ahead and get, 2 good role players and the 30th pick or whatever. And maybe that opens the door for a KCP trade. But I would say I wouldn't be surprised if the Nuggets wound up with KCP by the end of the night. I think he's one of their.
I still feel like that's a deal that if it happens would happen. Well, I think next week, but the draft equity part of this is interesting. So we'll see.
Okay.
Draft equity for KCP doesn't make a ton of sense to me. I know a lot of people have thrown this out, like Barton in the 30th pick for KCP. It's just the 30th pick, what have you. And I just think what it is ammo. It's just like, what pieces do we have to improve the roster? And people think I'm crazy when I say this. I don't think KCP is better than Barton. I think that he's better for Denver, but I don't think he is a better player. And so it's always tough when you trade additional assets for an equal value player just because they fit your roster more.
This gets into a little bit more complicated, not a little bit more. This gets into wildly more complicated. Lou Dort is on the table for OKC, but what I've heard is like Lou Dort and 12 for a top 7 pick is like what's being bandied about. So again, if the Nuggets want to get in on Dort, I don't know that they have the draft capital to get there, unless it's something where it's like OKC needs another pick to do something, so they're going to trade Dort for 2 picks and then partner. Like, it gets into a whole complicated sequence, and in such a short time, I feel like that's unlikely. But do you have thoughts on Lou Dort as an addition for the Nuggets?
I mean, I've been high on him at a certain price. I think he's interesting. He's got a great first step, which I think is important for Denver. Like when we talk about offense, he's got a good first step. I think he would get to the rim, alongside Jokic, and then he guards as well as anybody that's going to be on the market for Denver. So I'm intrigued by him. I just think the price will likely be too high.
Okay, let's take a break because I just realized we're running late. So let's take a break and we'll come back and we'll talk about, what's the name?
Vasilije Micic.
I'm going to get it. I promise.
I could be wrong too. Micic, I've heard it pronounced Micic, but typically the CIC would be Chich. So Micic is what I've been saying.
Okay, we'll talk about Vasilije Micic after the break. But first, I need to tell you about Built Bar. That's got a new coconut brownie chunk Built Bar. It's absolutely amazing. And now it's in puff form. That's right. Chewy marshmallow with coconut brownie chunk flavor covered in 100% real chocolate. And it's high in protein, low in calories, low in sugar. It's amazing what Built Bar can do. The best part about the Built Bar puffs, of course, is they taste amazing, but you can enjoy them guilt-free because they're actually good for you. They're the perfect treat, perfect when you got a craving, you need to satisfy your sweet tooth, or if you need a quick, healthy snack, they're an excellent source of protein. They're made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides a ton of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. Delicious coconut, rich sweet brownie, creamy marshmallow. Stop fantasizing. Get to Built.com to order your box of coconut brownie chunk Built Puffs right now. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for making this part of your day and your first listen each and every day. The Ultimate NBA Mock Draft is up. You can go listen to all of the picks that were made by the Locked On crew. Expert analysis from the Locked On NBA Big Board guys, Odyssey experts. It's a huge project. Just search Ultimate NBA Mock Draft wherever you get podcasts. All right, Adam. Vasilije Micic has been rumored as a potential trade target. The rights are owned by OKC. Tell me about Vasilije Micic.
So it's funny because he's a guy I think you're going to hate. I actually am really intrigued by him. I really like him. So the story on him, he was drafted in 2014, the same time that Jokic was drafted. He's 28 years old. So he was a drafted stash. Philly took him. He went over in the Al Horford trade. He was one of the guys exchanged. And OKC, so now he's at OKC. OKC, no intention of playing him. And I think he has no intention of playing for OKC. Like, he is a guy that, if he were to come over to Denver, would be a guy that would need some minutes. What's interesting about him, he was a very talented player. He's like a great passer, scorer, fierce competitor, 6'5" on-ball guard. He can play off-ball as well, but he's a very good pick-and-roll player, extremely creative passer. I would almost liken him to Teodosic stylistically, only he's way bigger and stronger and like has more. I think with both Facu and Teodosic, both of those guys had like major physical compromises. Teodosic too skinny, too little, didn't seem to have any interest in like beefing up his body. Facu too short. Micic is a guy that is like 6'5", 210, 215. Like he's a normal NBA sized player. He's built like Jamal Murray, height wise, weight wise. But he's a great competitor. Now here's his story arc. He had this talent, but it was unrecognized. He was like a late bloomer, kind of plays, he's playing professionally, gets to be about 24, 25, and he plays for Jasikevicius, with former Lithuanian star, who's become a great European coach, unsurprisingly. And by all accounts, really elevated his game, become this, like unlocked all of those talents that he had. And since then has been an MVP. He's been a Final Four MVP, and he's coming off of winning the championship, EuroLeague championship. And he, in which he hit in the Final Four, he hit a game winner at the buzzer, really big time clutch shot, 23 points in the final game. So he wins regular season MVP and finals MVP in the same year. He's been great. He's a breakout star over the last 3 seasons. He's been this caliber of player. So now he's ready to come over, but he's a guy that would need a minutes guarantee. Like he's not even an order above Facu, in that it's like he was not going to come over here to maybe play, maybe not. He would need some kind of like, hey, if he's coming over, it's to be a X amount of minute player, likely for Denver backup 1 or 2. So he's that caliber of player, but he's really interesting. Not elite defensively, and I know you're going to laugh at this. He's got the size and length to be a good defender. He competes really hard. He's not a negative, but he's not a lockdown. So when you start talking about, we keep talking about backcourt players, he's not a lockdown defender, but he is solid and competes on that end. And he just has like, I know you're going to hate this and you're going to roll your eyes. He seems to have an it factor. He's a great big game. He's a great big, well, because I'm saying like these things are like intangible, or maybe they don't translate. Facu was a great big game player as well. So I think he's very intriguing. You start to look at what are the scenarios he would come over to Denver. First of all, Jake Fisher's reporting that this is the craziest piece of all of this. Allegedly, Jokic is advocating for it, that he's like really telling the team, hey, we need this guy, which is just a really interesting detail. But to me, he would only make sense if Denver was completely reconfiguring their backcourt. If it was like Monte and Barton are gone, and maybe there's another move to be had that you're like, hey, there's another piece here, because I just don't see him as like Bones, Murray, him, Monte. Like that would not make any sense to me.
So in the comments, I just want to clear this up because I'm very thankful for our commenters that are like, it's Micic.
Okay.
It's like a Z. It's either a TS or a Z. Micic is
right.
The pronunciation. I think it's important to get people's names right. I don't like being one of the, like, how many times have you and I just been like punching things when somebody says Jokic and we're like,
totally. Early on, I give a little, like, I remember somebody yelled at me, somebody in the Nuggets front office, when I said Doncic or something, like the first time I'd ever heard of him. And I was like, guys, I just heard of this guy. Like, give me a little learning curve here. Like,
yeah. And look, it's just there's a culture gap, and I'm willing to admit it. So, right. I get you. I understand why you would be like thinking that I would be resistant. I want to be like super clear on this. I think not every international player translates to the NBA. But that doesn't mean that you should like not take chances on international players, because it'd be like saying you should not take chances on college players because they don't translate, or G League guys because they don't translate.
But he is in the mold of Teodosic and Facu, 2 players that I think you didn't like from the get-go, and for various reasons, for similar reasons. And I think he is like them with no physical compromises, if that makes sense. Like he's a good build guy.
But that matters.
Maybe that's all that matters. Maybe that raises the gap.
Yeah, it matters. It helps, I think. I think it helps a lot because you can mold and translate yourself if you have more options physically. So I think that matters. Like I will say, I don't think you can put. I'll just say, based off of what we've seen from the team, you can't have a major rotation piece be a defensive liability. Somebody in the comments kind of compared him to like. He's kind of the same level of defender as maybe like prime Gallo, which is an interesting one because like Gallo drove me insane.
His numbers were always good. But Gallo's 6'10". Like this, I don't think that's fair. Micic is 6'5", I believe. So it doesn't make sense to me that they would be in the same category.
Right, but I think maybe in terms of effort, maybe is that the translation? Or do you feel like with Micic,
I think
there
he's a
is a
competitor. I think he's a
okay?
competitor. So
You
I
think
don't.
he's a competitor? He's just limited in what he can physically do.
Yeah, he's like you imagine him being on an island against Russell Westbrook or John Morant. It's like he's going to be compromised there. So and he probably in a playoff series is going to be switched out onto those guys a lot, and it probably hurts you. I'll tell you this because we're talking about him as a point guard and an on-ball guard. I think he is part of what's so intriguing to me is that I think can be both on ball and off ball. So alongside Bones, alongside Murray, or in either role as the lead guy where they get to play off or vice versa. But I think if I think about and I take this report at face value, and we both like Jake Fisher, we think he reports honestly and accurately. If I take this and I try to think about what Jokic says at the end of the season, like we can do this if we play together. I think the number one thing Micic would bring to the Nuggets is he would elevate the chances of the Nuggets playing flow offensive basketball a lot. Because I think he's one of those guys that knows how to read the court really quickly as a connector or as an on-ball guy. Now, does that come at a cost? Like we keep talking about, you just need they need a Gary Payton and they need a Josh Hart. Like they need that. Those guys aren't connectors. They're not going to keep the game going, but they do provide that defense. So what's the trade-off? If Micic was here, I think the Nuggets would play the beautiful game significantly more frequently in the regular season and playoffs. But what's the cost at which you would get that?
Yeah, I think this is a really tough question in terms of you can build a beautiful game team. The Spurs were so solid defensively. They were so solid defensively. And the Nuggets are the opposite of solid. And it's hard right now. Like this is why I always kind of think like the Nuggets in particular, but there's a lot of teams like this where it's like, well, they need a connector who can also shoot, who's also a good defender. And I'm like, oh, so everybody just needs Klay Thompson. That's what everybody needs. Like 2017 Klay Thompson. That's what they need.
So
and
it's
tough.
It is so tough. What's funny to me about it is here's another value I have, and it's almost like I feel like Micic is 2 years too late for the Nuggets. I wish he would have come here when Murray got hurt. You bring him over right then, because I feel like the Klay Thompsons of the world can be developed. It's really hard, and they have to be in the right system. And I wonder if you had Micic here, if you got a little bit more of that from the guys currently on the roster. If you would have gotten Aaron Gordon growing into more of that type of player, Michael Porter growing more into that, because now instead of one guy that's sort of playing that style, you have two guys, and it like rewards you a little bit more.
And maybe the answer here is potentially Micic as an addition to one, like make Jokic happy and get through the regular season. And then you have guys like KCP or whoever else that they add as a counter. Like my big thing is options. I think you need options. I think you need more than one answer to the questions that you were faced when you're pursuing an NBA title. And maybe Micic is, an answer to various questions that the Nuggets will face. But we'll have to see whether they feel that it's worth it. Jokic, being in support of them adding him, obviously, I think goes a long way.
One quick thing here before you get to that. I think Micic makes more sense for Denver if they somehow rid themselves of Monte, Barton, and Bones. So if you use those guys as like, hey, all of them can be traded, including Bones, because we're bringing in this like stud other piece, then I think Micic would make a little bit more sense because he replaces Bones as an offensive force.
Mike Singer just tweeted, by the way, somebody include me in the chat. Again, thanks to all you guys in the chat and ladies. Just because there's a lot of interest league-wide in Monte Morris does not mean the Nuggets are moving him. Source told me this morning it's, quote, highly unlikely he's getting traded tonight. I would say that mirrors what I've heard, which is like the Nuggets are not out there being like, hey, you want Monte Morris? Hey, you want Monte Morris? Hey, you want Monte Morris? But the calls that come in when they're like, hey, we want to try and gauge where you're at, the Nuggets say like, Monte's available for the right price. We value him a lot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a little surprised me that Mike would report that he's.
I know these reports are killing me. Like they're just so funny, man. Like we all have the same information. That's just how it's going to go. Like the order of how this stuff is going to go down is just hilarious to me. Of course, a team until a trade happens, a team's not going to be like, this is not a scenario where it's like we have to get rid of him. Everybody knows the date. The expiration date is at 6:00, and we've got to do it. So,
you need to embrace the silliness more, my friend. You just your dislike of the silliness is it hampers
You know
your
why it
ability to
is? It's
enjoy.
because I see the chain effect of like
Yeah.
news is told like, okay, we get this, we from the source, we get the story, it gets reported, it gets translated into Twitter, Reddit, and everything else, and like it gets run with. And I just see this, and I'm always like, we see the starting point and we see the end point, and I'm like, what the hell just happened in this game of telephone?
Yeah. All right, that's gonna do it for Locked On Nuggets. We gotta get out of here. Again, we'll be on tonight after the draft, giving you a reaction to whatever the Nuggets decide to do with the NBA draft. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have yourselves a great day. Enjoy draft night. We'll talk to you guys again